Darkcast Network. The light shines brightest on our indie podcasts.
Hey, what's up, you guys? I'm Catherine.
And I'm Haley.
And we are Saturdays Are for the Ghouls,
A podcast on the Podmoth Network.
We cover all things spooky, like horror movies, true crime, the supernatural, and spooky stories.
In the most chaotic way possible.
So join your favorite ghoul friends every Saturday wherever you listen to podcasts.
And become a spooky babe.
So spooky babes, we'll see you
in your nightmares.
What's up, y'all? It's your girl Syrai from the Freaky as Fuck podcast, and I don't think I have to tell y'all that I am a huge fan and collector of all things spooky and macabre. And if you're like me, then might I recommend checking out Hell Yeah VooDoo Dolls? This incredible online shop has one-of-a-kind handcrafted voodoo dolls, handmade jewelry, and all kinds of Hell Yeah merch, such as hoodies, t-shirts, beanies, and more. If you're looking to get a unique gift for yourself or for your favorite person, be sure to check out Hell Yeah VooDoo Dolls. You can find them at hellyeahvoodoodolls.com, where you can also find some info on the 4,000 square foot haunted Victorian manor that they're renovating. Shop Hell Yeah VooDoo Dolls today for your spooky needs.
Hey there, this is my disclaimer. Beyond the Rainbow is a true crime podcast. It's not suitable for children, and it might not be suitable for some adults either. I have a filthy mouth. I had to get it. It was on sale and it matched my filthy mind perfectly. Don't say I didn't warn ya. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. You're listening to Beyond the Rainbow. True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host, CJ, and co-founder of Darkcast Network, where you can find 20 of the most awesome shows ever. We have a Darkcast website, and I'll put the link in the show notes. On the website are little introductory videos of each show on the network. This way you can read up on them and decide who to listen to first. Beyond the Rainbow is a one-woman researched, written, recorded, and edited production. Why? Because I'm a badass! And should you feel so compelled to be a badass too, I have a Buy Me a Coffee /Rainbow Crimes account. Because coffee is my liquid addiction. So please help me support my habit. I'm on all the social medias, which technically makes me a social butterfly of sorts, I guess. Find me on Facebook at Beyond the Rainbow, and just about everywhere else as Rainbow Crimes. Plus, be sure to check out my website at beyondtherainbowpodcast.com. Just a quick reminder, I'm taking a little break on the Missing But Not Forgotten segment, but hopefully again soon I will start it back up. I also want to remind you, coming up on March 5th, Beyond the Rainbow will be the featured show on a podcast called Beyond Bizarre. I will be covering the case of Catherine Janess, the 40-year-old lesbian mysteriously murdered in Atlanta's Piedmont Park last summer. In other Rainbow Crime news, I'm super excited to be part of my very first True Crime Festival. It's the Pacific Northwest Crime Fest, and it'll be held in Auburn, Washington, which is very close to Seattle. I can hardly wait because I've never been to Seattle before, and I plan to spend at least a couple days in Seattle as well. Now, this won't happen until October 8th and 9th of this year, but I wanted to tell you just in case you Rainbow Warriors wanted to make a trip of it yourself. I'm hoping my friend Aurora from Murder News will attend with me. She'll be my +1 as I represent Beyond the Rainbow, and we will both represent Darkcast Network. Okay, Warriors, I think that's all the tidbits I have for you now. So let's get into this episode's case. He was 18 years old and he had a fighting spirit up until then. When he was 9, his mom found a lump in his neck. A biopsy revealed that the boy had a cancer. It was a cancer called Hodgkin's disease. By the age of 11, he had beat the cancer. He had been through 2 laborious years of chemotherapy, but it was gone. Yes, Scotty Joe Weaver, he was a tough kid. At the age of 15, his dad passed away. His dad, who was there through his entire life, helped him through his cancer, and suddenly his dad was gone at such a critical age for the teenager. As Scotty was going through school, the kids started to become aware of Scotty's sexual orientation, mostly because Scotty was honest about it. He was out and proud. The other kids would pick on him and bully him for being gay. Scotty was just trying to live his truth. But this was Bay Minette, rural Alabama in 2004. Scotty ended up dropping out of high school because the shit that the other kids dished out on a daily, it was just too much to bear. As a result, it became a big serving of depression for him, something else to add to his list of fights. Scotty was one of 4 brothers. The oldest brother, Lum, was 24 years old, and he too was gay. So don't tell me it's not in our genes. Lum hid his sexuality when he was in school, so Lum wasn't bullied like Scotty. But Scotty was thankful to have his older brother to confide in. Sometimes Scotty would borrow Lum's makeup and beat his face. Drag race watchers, you know exactly what that means. If someone is to beat their face, they're putting makeup on. Scotty would then put on a blonde wig and a dress, and he would stuff the boob part very full, because he was doing a Dolly Parton impersonation. Lum said he was pretty good at it, too. He would perform in drag queen competitions at gay bars all the time. It became a really fun outlet and release for him. At these competitions, Scotty started to make some gay friends. It was sorely something that was lacking in Scotty's life. Scotty and Lum's mom knew both her sons were gay, and she figured as long as she showed them both how much she loved them, it didn't matter. But she did worry about both of them. She worried especially about her younger son Scotty and his drag performing. After quitting high school, Scotty took a job at a local Waffle House. He was a really hard worker, and sometimes he would work double shifts just to earn some extra money. It was important for Scotty to become independent and to be able to live on his own someday. He loved his mama, but he didn't want to be a burden on her. After months and months of work, he was finally able to afford a 2-bedroom mobile home near his mama's house. Wasn't a whole lot, but it worked for him and it gave him the independence he yearned for. There was a female friend in Scotty's life, 18-year-old Nichole Kelsey. The two had been besties since kindergarten. Only back then she was Nichole Briers. Nichole married a guy named Michael Kelsey, and she took his last name. A few days after they were married, though, Michael turned himself into law enforcement on robbery charges. This was in January of 2004, and it didn't take long after that for Nichole to discover she was pregnant, and to find herself a new boyfriend named Christopher Gaines. Nichole already had a young child, and now she was pregnant. When Scotty found out Nichole was pregnant, he vowed to take care of her, the child she already had, and the baby that was going to be coming into the world soon. He invited Nichole and her child to come live with them. Nichole took Scotty up on this offer, and she moved everything in her life into Scotty's trailer, including her new current boyfriend, Christopher. Scotty's mom was good to Nichole, too. She would watch Nichole's young child while Nichole and her boyfriend, Christopher, would go out and party. And Scotty, he was just so sweet and so good-natured about pregnant Nichole, her child, and Nichole's boyfriend moving in, he never uttered any complaints. And it sucks because neither of these two, Nichole or Christopher, who were perfectly able-bodied adults, neither of them had jobs or any income at all to help with the rent or bills. And still, Scotty allowed them both to sponge. He allowed them both to live there without contributing to any of the financial obligations. And he went out and he worked his ass off at Waffle House to pay rent, electricity, water, and buy groceries for all of them. Even though Christopher, he didn't like Scotty because of Scotty's sexual identity. And when Christopher would invite his friend Robert Porter to come hang out, things would get damn near unbearable for Scotty in his own home. Because Robert Porter hated Scotty. He hated Scotty so much because Scotty was gay. Robert also didn't have a job, but he'd boast about beating the shit out of faggots in front of Scotty. On July 16th, 2004, Robert, who was there visiting his buddy Christopher, was provoking a fight with Scotty. Robert tried to hit him, but somehow Scotty was able to avoid the attack. After that, Robert kept saying he wanted to kill Scotty because he was a fag. Scotty finally put his foot down a little bit and said Robert wasn't welcome there. But of course, Robert would come back when Scotty was at work. Scotty truly loved his friend Nichole. He would have had to put up with the bullshit from Christopher and Robert. That summer, Scotty told Nichole he loved her. He wasn't in love with her because he didn't have feelings like that for her, but he loved her and wanted to take care of her. He said he wanted to marry her and they could raise the baby and her other child together as a family. Although Nichole knew Scotty was gay, there was something about this suggestion that totally freaked her out. It freaked her out so much, she asked her boyfriend Christopher to kill Scotty. Here's an idea, bitch. Why don't you take your skank ass, your kid, and your lazy ass homophobic boyfriend and move your shit out of the free home you've been given by a loyal, trusting, and loving friend. No? Too easy? Do you really think if you kill your meal ticket, you can stay in this trailer forever? Who's gonna pay the rent and the bills? Who's gonna buy your food? Bet you didn't think that far in advance, did ya? Here she is, one kid with her and another baby on the way. And she's not sure who the baby daddy is either. She's freeloading off an 18-year-old boy. A boy who is more of a man than many 30-year-olds. And she wants to off him? I'm all about women empowerment. But this fucking hoe? She's as dumb as a stump. On July 18th, 2004, 2 days after he was accosted by Robert in his own home, Scotty had just gotten off the graveyard shift at Waffle House. It was payday, so he dropped by his mama's house to repay her for some money he had borrowed. He probably had to borrow the money to support Nichole, her kid, her boyfriend, and her boyfriend's friend. Then Scotty went home, and when he got home, Robert was there visiting with Christopher and Nichole. Because of course he was! Robert and Christopher grabbed Scotty and they tied him to a chair in his trailer. $10 fell out of Scotty's pocket in the scuffle. Robert picked up the $10 and he searched Scotty and found another $80 that Scotty had from his paycheck. After that, Christopher and Robert started to torture Scotty. They hit him, they kicked him, they stabbed him, they strangled him. They sliced his throat to the point of near decapitation. And then together with Nichole in the car, they drove around with Scotty's body. They were talking about how to dispose of Scotty. They ended up taking him 8 miles away from his trailer to a remote area in the woods. They poured gasoline on Scotty's body and they lit him on fire. This was a clear and cut case of overkill. Overkill murders truly have a flavor of passion to them. In my opinion, Christopher and especially Robert clearly suffered from not being comfortable with their own sexuality. Perhaps they even had an attraction to Scotty. I know, I always think this. But more times than not, I'm right about it. Scotty's mama hadn't heard from him in a couple of days, and that was uncommon. Scotty talked to his mom almost every day. She tried to call him, but had no luck. A couple days later, Nichole, Christopher, and their friend Robert dropped by Scotty's mom's house. They said they hadn't seen Scotty and she should call the police. So she did, and she placed a missing persons report. July 22nd, 2004. There was a guy riding an all-terrain vehicle in the woods. This was about 8 miles from Scotty's trailer. He spotted something, and upon closer observation, he saw it was a charred human body. He called the police. Obviously, this was a murder case. A week or so later, Scotty's family had a quiet funeral for him. There were about 250 people in attendance at Crossroads Church of God. This venue turned out to be a huge mistake, and many of the gay attendees, they left mid-ceremony. The overseer was the Reverend Helen Stewart, and she's one of those hateful, judgy-type religious zealots who interpret the Bible for their own purposes. Reverend Helen basically told the attendees Scotty Joe would be going to hell for his sinful sexual deviances, and so would anyone else there that was gay or bisexual that didn't change their ways. What should have been a loving send-off for a sweet boy turned out to be a demonstration filled with fire, brimstone, and contempt for anyone who was LGBTQ. Scotty was buried next to his grandma at McGill Cemetery. In the coming weeks, Nichole and Christopher would be moved out of Scotty's place, and the police would be investigating and doing some fine-tooth combing of the trailer. Enough evidence was found to arrest Christopher, Nichole, and Robert as suspects for the murder of Scotty Joe Weaver. The three sat in jail because they were not able to make the bail, and yes, I'm aware that rhymes. And of course they sat there because, they murdered their only source of income. 3 years later, right before their trials, each of the accused would admit to either murdering Scotty or being an accessory to the murder. It was determined that their motives were robbery, jealousy, and the fact that Scotty Joe was gay. Alabama currently has no laws to really protect the LGBTQ plus members, and it's the top state with laws that are aggressively hostile towards the LGBTQ plus. Alabama has been called the reddest of the red states by many. And that's not because the state is full of Republicans. It is full of conservative, highly religious people. Most of the people in Alabama, they just want to live a simple life without any bumps in the road. Why fix it if it ain't broken? And there lays the problem. It's all broken. The justice system, the organized religious system, our law enforcement, and our government. It's all broken. If we continually believe it's not broken, no change will ever come. It starts with the government, the overseers of our country, and it trickles down. That's why it's our job to place our votes for the best candidates. Alabamians don't want to worry about elections and politics. The following quote is from an opinion article on Alabama.com. Quote, "The majority of Alabamians believe the role of the government is to protect the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Government's job is not to manage our rights, but rather to defend them, allowing us to live our lives without the imminent threat of someone else infringing those God-given privileges. God-given privileges. Privileges. And this is why Alabama will likely continue not to be progressive in their ways of thinking about LGBTQ people. Scotty Joe's 3 murderers were all offered deals. Why? I have no idea. The deal was if they all pleaded guilty to murder, the court would go lighter on them. When it came time for Nichole's trial, she was being charged with conspiracy to commit murder. While she may not have participated in the violence part of Scotty's murder, she was the brains, if you can call it that, of the whole operation. Nichole was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and from what I can tell, she's not in prison anymore. I searched the prisoner databases in Alabama and nothing showed up. By now we know if the judicial system says 20 years, they mean 6 and then parole, which is exactly what happened for Nichole. And that means in 2010, she was paroled. Her crime was devious and so unnecessary. Unicorn justice was not served where Nichole is concerned. Christopher Gaines surprisingly took the plea deal to spare himself the death sentence. He pleaded guilty to murder, and the jury deliberated a whole 20 minutes before they came back with his guilty verdict. The judge then sentenced Christopher to life without parole. Robert Porter also pleaded guilty to spare himself death. Gee, Scotty was never given that choice. Robert received 2 consecutive life terms. Scotty's mom went to join him in heaven. She passed away in 2019 at the age of 63. And Scotty's brother Lum, he passed at the age of 40 last year in March of 2021. Rest in power, Scotty. This episode's True Crime Quickie comes to us from Mexico in the year 2005. The murders of this serial killer happened in the span of 3 months, from October 2005 to December 2005. By the end of January 2006, El Sadico, the sadist as he was called, was captured. Media tried to dub this murderer the Rainbow Killer, but because of his viciousness and the torture of his victims, the sadist stuck. The sadist is Raul Mariquin, and for being what was considered a very organized killer, he was caught rather quickly. He was born on September 1st, 1980, but in 2005, a 25-year-old Raul became a symbol for homophobia, and he was revered by other homophobes in Mexico for his torture and murders of gay men. I think that means it's time to revisit what I always say, and I said earlier in Scotty's case. The reason these so-called straight men have a problem with bi, gay, or trans, homophobia is a result of homosexual arousal or arousal to a trans woman, whichever be the case. It's been proven over and over again. Okay, so with this guy Raul, the sadist, he wasn't a bad-looking man. He wasn't rugged, beefy, or macho, but he appeared to be height-weight proportionate, maybe even a little on the petite side. He would go into gay bars in Mexico, and I'm almost certain he looked like he belonged as though he were part of the LGBTQ plus community. Once he was inside the bar, he would let some poor unsuspecting gay man who found him attractive make the approach. And once the 2 men were in conversation, Raul would lure the man back to his apartment or a hotel room, whichever was more convenient for him at the time. Raoul wasn't just a serial killer. He was a serial torturer and a serial kidnapper as well. As a kidnapper, he did end up letting a couple of his victims go. For instance, he kidnapped a man named Juan Alfaro. Instead of taking Juan back to his apartment, he took him to a seedy hotel. He tortured Juan mentally as well as physically. Raoul contacted Juan's family and he asked for a $5,000 ransom. The family paid, and a very tortured Juan was finally released. 6 days later, on October 27th, Raoul met Jonathan Razzo in a gay bar. Raoul invited Jonathan back to his apartment, and he opened the door and let Jonathan enter first. Then Raoul would be behind him with a plastic bag. He took Jonathan off guard and he jumped on him, put the bag over his head, and suffocated him with the bag until Jonathan was unconscious. Raoul would then torture Jonathan for 16 days while he waited for Jonathan's family to come up with the ransom request. When the family couldn't pay, Raoul murdered Jonathan. November 30th, Ricardo Lopez was kidnapped in the very same manner. He would be held, tortured physically and psychologically for 9 days. When Raoul only received a portion of his requested $5,000 ransom because the family could only gather $2,000, Ricardo was strangled to death. Raoul picked up and brought home Jose Galindo on December 13th. Raoul got into contact with Jose's mother, who pleaded and cried for Raoul to please let her son go. Neither of them had any money to their name. It's unknown if Raoul was having a soft moment, but he did let Jose go quickly. And he told him, "If you go to authorities or you tell anyone, I will kill you and I won't think twice about it." 3 days later, on December 16th, Raoul would again go through his murder dance, and he brought home Armando Rivas. Armando's family immediately paid the ransom to bring their son home. As soon as the ransom was paid in full, Raoul killed Armando. I'm not sure why he didn't follow his normal protocol this time. It could have been he was escalating, because that very same day he took Armando, that December 16th, Raoul would bring home yet another man. Victor Gutierrez was brought back to Raoul's place. Victor's family was contacted, yet they could only raise $800 of the $5,000 that was asked of them. 6 days later, on the 22nd of December, Victor would be murdered. That was 4 men Raoul killed. He disposed of all the bodies he murdered by putting the bodies in suitcases and dispersing them in random areas around Mexico City. But for being a clean-appearing man, Raoul was sloppy, and he left some of his fingerprints and DNA evidence on or around his victims' bodies. Raoul was captured the end of January 2006. It was determined Raoul didn't act alone in all these kidnappings and murders. Raoul had what media called an apprentice. We might call it an accomplice. And that man's name was Juan Madrid. He was also arrested. At the trial for both Raoul and Juan, they were found guilty of the crimes, and they were sentenced to an accumulated 300 years of incarceration in a Mexico prison. Raoul was very nonchalant after his capture. He calmly stated, "Yes, I snuffed out 4 homosexuals that were in some way affecting society." He said he was sorry to the families for their pain and suffering, but he also said he'd do it again. Only the next time, he would pick richer and more famous victims, and would be much more careful so he didn't get caught. If notoriety was what Raoul was after, his timing was way off. because there was another more infamous serial killer in the area who was operating at the very same time he was. This serial killer happened to be a woman wrestler, and she murdered old ladies. But that's a story for another time. Rest in power, all the victims of El Sadico. Love you, Rainbow Warriors. Remember, it's not a crime to be gay. Unless you're a murderer.